Welcome back into Pigskin Perspectives. It was a very busy weekend in the college football. The NFL side, we're going to be honest right now, was quite awful. There was two good games out there this weekend. The rest of it was just awful for this Thanksgiving weekend. College football, though, delivered. We got a lot to go through there. Games, coaching changes, coaching hires, all that kind of fun stuff. Let's just get started. You'll remember last episode I did give you a 12-pack instead of a 6-pack because I just liked that many games. Well, today the recap has been narrowed back down to 6 because some of these games were absolute blowouts and I didn't really feel the need to mention them because they were blowouts. So let's get right into it. We're going to start off Friday night, or Friday afternoon, I guess. It was Tulane facing off against UTSA. I said this was going to be a very important game for Tulane to see if they really do have a good shot of getting that New Year's Six bowl bid. And they are staying right on track. They get a 29-16 victory over UTSA. And the big surprising part for me in this game was that Tulane basically controlled this game from start to finish. Now, I would have expected that, given that they are the 23rd ranked team at the time. But their previous few games, they've kind of let their opponents into the game, and it just didn't look like Tulane. And I figured UTSA coming in, UTSA has been pretty good this year. This is an opportunity for a trap game, and if they lose, it all falls apart, basically. Tulane winning this game, I think, speaks a lot of how Willie Fritz has built this team in the past 2 years. They wouldn't be in the playoff discussion if they beat Ole Miss. They just wouldn't. They'd be sitting at like 15. This is a completely different scenario to where Cincinnati was, that was 2 years ago now? 2, somewhere around there. 2 years ago. Because Cincinnati, they went undefeated the year previous, lost in the Peach Bowl. Then went undefeated again with wins at Notre Dame and at Indiana. Just Tulane wouldn't have had the schedule to match that. Plus, they lost a game last year, I believe, even though they beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. The committee's awful. We'll get to that later, but Tulane get a much-needed win. They're going on to the American Conference Championship game. They'll face off against SMU, which SMU is a difficult test. That game is make or break for the American winning that Group of 6 bid, because if they lose, it's most likely going to Liberty. Moving on to the game, it was number 2 Ohio State facing off against number 3 Michigan, and it was number 3 Michigan taking the home victory 30-24 over the Buckeyes, 3 straight in the rivalry. Michigan played their game, I guess I would say, to their peak, because they like to draw out plays and run that clock down as much as possible and try to give their opponents as little time as possible. You do have some teams that just like to gun it out, get as many touchdowns as quick as possible. That's not Michigan. They are ground and pound, get 4 or 5 yards of play, keep running down that clock. And that's what they did in this game. Ohio State kept trying to come back. Kyle McCord just isn't that. And I'm not surprised at all. He hasn't looked that good all season. I shouldn't say he hasn't looked good. He's looked good. He doesn't look up to Ohio State level good. The interception on the final drive probably shouldn't have been thrown, if we're honest. That's on him. it was one of those games. Ohio State, just they couldn't get the ball rolling. It seemed like they played that way. In their big games this year, I'd say Notre Dame and Penn State especially, they start off very slow. And I don't get it, because by the fourth quarter, they got everything rolling and they're looking like a really good team. They can't play that way for 4 quarters. If they would have played that way for 4 quarters in this game, they win this game. But it's those slow starts that kill them, and they just couldn't get back from that. In a game where Michigan is going to draw out the clock as much as possible, you're not going to win that way. Moving on, number 10 Louisville was playing host to Kentucky in the Governor's Cup. It was Kentucky walking away with the victory, a 38-31 victory, so Louisville falls to 10-2 on the season. I know a lot of people thought, they might be on the outskirts of the playoffs. If they win the ACC, they might sneak in. No, they were never sneaking in. They lost to Pitt. They were never getting in. This loss only cemented it. They've basically cemented their spot in the Orange Bowl, because that goes to the highest ranked ACC team that's not the champion if the champion's in the playoff. So it most likely Florida State's getting in the playoff. Maybe. We'll get to that. But Louisville is either going to be the loser or the champion, and either way, they're going to Orange Bowl most likely. So a very defeating loss for Jeff Brom's Louisville Cardinals after it's still an amazing season, going 10-2 in your first year. That's pretty good. So just a flattening way to end it, I guess I would say, even though they got the ACC title ahead. What a game this was. Alabama-Auburn. Auburn was leading this game most of the way. I'm like, this is just the perfect way for this season to go. Alabama's going to finally get that loss that takes them out of the playoff race. So no matter what happens next weekend, they're out. And then Jalen Milroe happens, and 4th and 31 or whatever it was, and a Hail Mary to the end zone. It's caught right in the back corner. Absolutely outstanding football. That was just entertainment at its finest. Auburn didn't look as bad as they did last week when they lost to New Mexico State, obviously. And I wasn't surprised by that. I knew Auburn was going to be up for this game, and it would have made or broke this game or this season if they wouldn't have played well. If they would have got blown out, that's just a bad way to end year one of the Hugh Freeze era. But like I said, they were in that game until the end, and they just couldn't get it done in the end. The defense couldn't get a stop on that final drive, and that cost them the game. Washington, I told you, they haven't won a double-digit game since September. They sneak away in the Apple Cup. They win 24-21 on a last-second field goal. I really don't know about Washington. We're going to find out a lot this weekend, I think. Even though they've already played Oregon, I think we're going to find out more. Oregon is on all cylinders right now. I don't know how Washington gets it done, honestly. They just somehow get it done, and it's annoying how bad. I'll say bad. They're not awful. How bad they look most of the game, and then they sneak away with a victory, especially against bad opponents. Like Washington State, they finished 5-7, I think, so they're not going to a bowl game. Washington State was in this game most of the whole game. I don't know if they ever actually had the lead. They may have, but it was just like a back and forth battle, and then it turned into a back and forth battle of punts and all that kind of fun stuff. It ends up with Washington walking away with the victory. They're still undefeated. We'll get to the rankings in a minute, but they are no longer at number 4 for obvious reasons. But we find out a lot about the Huskies this weekend. Then finally, number 5, Florida State traveled to the Swamp to face off against the Gators. Florida fighting for bowl eligibility, and they were leading this game most of the game. It was kind of just like the Auburn-Alabama game. Florida was winning most of this game, and then the fourth quarter, just Florida State turned it on, and they walk away with the 24-15 victory. Again, I don't think they looked that good. They looked very exposed to a possible, loss. They look exposed to a possible loss next week, unless Louisville's just been the season, which I don't expect them to. Florida State escaped this one. Tate Rodemark got a concussion-worthy hit. He came back in the game, I think, but it was a very scary hit, and that was like at the beginning of the fourth quarter, so kind of started getting those 2014 Ohio State vibes. Is like their third stringer going to turn into Cardale Jones and lead them on to a national championship run? I don't think that's happening, but the talent on this team, I think, is good enough to get them into the playoff and at least put up a competition against Georgia, if that's who their opponent is. So given that, before we get into the playoff ratings, we've had a lot of coaching stuff happen since Saturday, basically. First of all, explaining the jersey, Northwestern, go Cats. Dave Braun, the former interim head coach named permanent head coach a few weeks ago, wins Big Ten Coach of the Year. Finished with a record of 7-5, an improvement from 1-11 under Pat Fitzgerald last year. He did whatever the media wanted Deion Sanders to do. Deion obviously disappeared in the second half of the season. They went 4-8, something like that. But yeah. So Dave Braun, Big Ten Coach of the Year, very much deserved over any of the other competition. They lost their best player from last year on a 1-11 team, and he just turns this around into a 7-5 team. So very, very happy for him winning that. Other coaching news, Michigan State officially makes the hire official. It was rumored a lot within I'd say 72 hours before the hire was actually made, that it was going to be Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. The rumor was, he may have started the interview process weeks ago. He had the questions from the media about a week ago, was asked if he's looking for another job, and he was saying, well, I hope my agent is, because that's just how things work. It seemed he was good as gone then. And he now fills the shoes that have been opened by Mel Tucker, because Mel Tucker decided to do dumb stuff. And it's going to be a large rebuild at Michigan State, as it seems half the team has entered the transfer portal since the announcement. Michigan State has no quarterbacks right now. Noah Kim, Sam Levitt, and Caton Hauser all in the transfer portal now. Sam Levitt's already said he is 100% not coming back, because he has a grudge against Jonathan Smith, because Levitt is from Oregon, and Oregon State did not recruit him. So he has bad blood with Jonathan Smith. So, okay. It's going to be a long rebuild ahead. He's going to have to hit the transfer portal, because there's not a lot on this team right now. Any talent that was there seems to be transferring out. So he is going to have to find ways around this, because I'm not expecting a lot of Oregon State players to come over. There is a lot of rumors going around right now that they felt hoodwinked and bamboozled. There's reports that he told them before their game at Oregon that he was taking the job, which is absolutely insane if that's true. Some are saying that he interviewed during the bye week. Oregon State went 3-4 after the bye week. The team just felt like he was gone during those games, and he was constantly confronted on it. He lied to them and all that fun stuff. I think a lot of bridges were burnt with that Oregon State team. So honestly, I'm not expecting a lot of Beavers to come over to Michigan State, which that's quite bad because he had pretty decent players going there. But like I said, I'm not expecting a lot to come over because the transfer portal opens, I believe, December 3rd or 4th officially. But if your coach is fired, your coach leaves, it opens up immediately for 30 days. Their window has technically opened. I don't think one Oregon State player has entered the portal. Now, are they waiting to see who the head coach was? Possibly. That announcement was made. It is going to be Trent Bray, the defensive coordinator, getting promoted to head coach. Does that get a lot of players to stay around? Honestly, probably. I'm expecting them to go get a big-ish name for offensive coordinator. Because, Smith was bringing a lot of staff to Michigan State. Bray was one I would have wanted over the offensive coordinator because it doesn't seem Beaver fans were overly thrilled with their offense, but Bray really turned that team around on defense, and he's now the head coach there, so that's obviously not happening. Other coaching news, Mark Stoops was head coach of Texas A&M for all about 10 minutes, and then Texas A&M internet, Twitter, fan blogs, all basically revolted against it, and then Mark Stoops wasn't the head coach at Texas A&M. And then it ends up being Mike Elko from Duke becoming head coach. I don't know. I honestly thought Stoops was the better hire here. I think I know that Elko is coached as defensive coordinator at Texas A&M. Stoops has more experience. I think he's the better coach. He's a better recruiter. He's going to get you wins on the field. I don't know if Elko is going to do that. Honestly, I don't. There's a chance we're back in this routine with Texas A&M in 3 years, basically, because I don't know if Elko is going to last. I did mention Trent Bray. He's become head coach at Oregon State. Sean Lewis looks to be headed to San Diego State to replace the retiring Brady Hoke. Sean Lewis was the offensive coordinator at Colorado up until week 9 when Deion decided to demote him, even though defense or offense wasn't the problem. Okay. He was previously head coach at Kent State before getting hired by Deion. So he moves back into a head coaching position. And as of right now, I think that's the main ones that have been filled right now. I know Syracuse announced a Georgia staffer as their new head coach. I want to say like linebackers coach or something. I don't know enough about him. Jeff Lebby, Oklahoma's offensive coordinator, got hired by Mississippi State. It's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. And I don't think there were any other major openings as of right now that have been filled or unfilled. There really wasn't a lot of firings. I would have expected a lot more firings previous or after, I should say, the final game of the season. Just didn't happen. The biggest news coming out today, which Trent Bray might top it, but I don't think it does on the internet. Bobby Petrino, former Texas A&M offensive coordinator, he got let go after the season because Jimbo got fired and he wasn't going to be retained. Former Missouri State head coach, he was there previously. Former Louisville head coach, former Arkansas head coach, former Western Kentucky, I think he was there for a year. Former Atlanta Falcons head coach, was only there for like 7 or 8 games. Well, he is returning to Arkansas as offensive coordinator. The deals are still being worked out, but it very much does sound like Bobby Petrino is returning to Fayetteville. He's going to be riding in on his Harley. Hopefully there's no staffers on the back of him. Yeah, I was as shocked as anybody when I saw this news. I thought there was no way this was ever happening again, given how he exited Arkansas. I just didn't think it was ever going to happen. And here we are, 2023. What, 11 years after it happened? He is back as offensive coordinator, and I will not be surprised at all if he is interim head coach by week 10 next year. If this team starts like 2-7 or 2-5, I should say. If we get to week 8 and he's interim head coach, I would not be surprised at all. So let's get into the college football playoff rankings, and brand new, just released a few hours ago. No real surprise at one. It is still Georgia. Actually, I guess it is a little surprise. I think people thought Michigan getting the win over number 2 that they would get the win here, or get to number 1 here. They did not. Georgia stays at 1. Michigan moves up to 2. Washington moves up to 3. Florida State moves up to 4. So everybody kind of just moved up a spot after Ohio State drops. Oregon stays at 5. Ohio State does drop to 6, which I was a little surprised by. I kind of figured that they would split them between Texas and Alabama. That just didn't happen. Texas stays at 7. So 7 through 11 stay the same. No, they don't, because Louisville dropped. I'm sorry about that. Louisville was at 10. So 10 and 11 move up a position. The order stays the same. Same with Oklahoma and LSU. The order stays the same. They just move up a spot. Louisville drops from 10 to 14. Arizona stays at 15. Iowa stays at 16, I believe. Actually, no, Oregon State was at 16. So Iowa moves up a position. Notre Dame moves up a position. Oklahoma State moves up a position. NC State shoots up the rankings to number 19 after a win over North Carolina. Oregon falls to 20 after their loss to, or Oregon State moves down to 20 after their loss to Oregon. Tennessee sits at 21. The highest ranked group of top 5, Tulane, sits at 22. Clemson sit at 23. Liberty 24. And falling to 25 is Kansas State. So that was the penultimate edition of the college football playoff rankings. Of course, Sunday afternoon, we get the official playoffs. We find out where everybody's going bowling. It's going to be a fun day had by all. But first, we got conference championship week, so we will, of course, preview that on Thursday. We'll break down all 10 because what else are we going to do? So we'll take a look at those. But let's get into the NFL because this was one of the weekends of all time of NFL football. We started on Thanksgiving. The Packers stunned the Lions 29-22. I kind of saw it coming because I've said the Lions are fraudulent. They kind of proved it in this game. They didn't look good. And they lose this one. I'm not going to say it, but the schedule, it's going to get difficult for the Lions. And there's a chance that they don't win the division. Just saying. The Cowboys dominated the Commanders 45-10. It was just the big news coming out of this game was Dolly Parton's halftime show. Everybody loved that. This game was obviously a blowout. Same with the 49ers. Nothing really coming out of that game except the 49ers are back to being juggernauts. They had that 3-game losing skid a few games ago. That's gone. All those thoughts are gone. This team is so good right now. They still look like a Super Bowl contender. Dolphins travel to New Jersey to face off against the Jets on Black Friday. They walk away with a 34-13 victory. Tim Boyle looked awful. The Jets defense is one of the worst used tools in the NFL because they are so good, but their offense is just so awful that they don't have anything to work with. Moving on to Sunday. I mean, when I broke these down on Wednesday, I think I previewed them. There are so many bad games in here. The Falcons and the Saints, that was ugly. That was a turnover fest. It ended up with the Falcons getting a 24-15 victory in that awful NFC South. The Steelers traveled to Cincinnati to face off against a Joe Burrow-less Bengals for the first time this season. The Steelers walk away with the victory 16-10. The Steelers are quietly creeping up the playoff picture because after the Matt Canada firing, they actually put up numbers on offense on Sunday, and they actually look like a halfway decent team, kind of. Kenny Pickett's still not good, though. This was a game. The Titans get a 17-10 victory over the now 1-10 Panthers. Given that, Frank Reich has been fired after the 1-10 start for the Panthers. And you also have to remember the Panthers don't have their first round pick next year because they traded to the Bears for Bryce Young. Yes. Very, very interesting what the Panthers are going to do. The Buccaneers traveled to Indianapolis to face off against the Colts. The Colts won 27-20. The scoreline makes it more close than it actually was. The Colts really dominated this game start to finish. The Bucs just kind of kept creeping back in a little, and they just were never really in the game. I don't know if I should give this game the Disgusting Game of the Week award because there are, more options. But it was the Giants getting a 10-7 victory over the Patriots. The Patriots look awful. Mac Jones, not good. He's not an NFL caliber quarterback, but he's still playing because they don't have any other NFL caliber quarterbacks. Sneaky fun game was the Jaguars at the Texans. The Jaguars walked away with the 24-21 victory. Became a ref show in the third quarter, which did ruin kind of some of the excitement of it. But it was the Jaguars walking away with victorious, adding on to their AFC South lead. The Browns traveled to Denver to face off against the Broncos. It became an injury fest for the Browns as they lose 29-12. Myles Garrett gets injured. Dorian Thompson-Robinson gets injured. Kareem Hunt, I believe, picked up an injury at some point. It just all fell apart, and I really don't know about this Browns team. They have the pieces there to do something. It's just they got to get the train rolling, but it's the injuries that keep derailing it. So I don't know what's going to happen there. The Rams beat the Cardinals 37-14. It's what you expect out of the Cardinals. Just that's how they're playing right now. The Chiefs get a 31-17 victory over the Raiders. Antonio Pierce picks up his second consecutive loss as interim head coach. It is what it is. The Chiefs still are winning the AFC West. It's not going to really matter. The most entertaining game of the weekend was 100%. The Eagles defeating the Bills 37-34 in overtime. This game kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. We end up getting to overtime. The Bills get the ball. They go down the field. They end up on fourth down inside the 10, I believe. It was like 4th and 5 or something like that. They kicked the field goal, knowing that doesn't win you the game and knowing Jalen Hurts was going to take that team down the field and win the game. They still kicked the field goal, but it was still the Eagles walking away victorious. I still think the Bills should have went for it on fourth down. You're not going to win a game by kicking field goals. Contrary to popular belief, there was a game that was won strictly by field goals this weekend, which is the last one on this list. But we got to do Baltimore 20, Los Angeles Chargers 10. I don't know what to think of this Chargers team. I think Brandon Staley's out at the end of the year. This team's bad. And finally, a team that did win a game by field goals. It was the Chicago Bears 12, Minnesota Vikings 10. This one's also up there for worst games of the week. What an absolutely disgusting game of football to watch on Monday Night Football. The fact that they subjected that to us was torture, kind of, because both teams, not great. Joshua Dobbs threw 4 interceptions for the Vikings. The Bears win on only field goals. Justin Fields doesn't look great. I don't know what the Bears are doing in the offseason. It's just one big mess. So given that, that is going to be it for this episode of Pigskin Perspectives. Hopefully you enjoyed this video recapping all of the football that happened over this Thanksgiving weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you stumbled across this video, hit like, hit subscribe, tell anybody you know about the channel. And we will be back on Thursday to preview Conference Championship Week and the NFL week ahead. Hopefully they have better games than we had this weekend. So we will see you then for another episode of Pigskin Perspectives.